Hey there folks, welcome to the Sheepdogs Union. Today I wanted to make a slightly different kind of video and talk to a different audience than usual. And I want to talk to people today who are either new to gun ownership or don't know anything about guns or even don't like guns, and talk about the 4 cardinal rules of gun safety. So saw a comment online from Collier Noir. Go follow him if you want. He's cool. That if we took a fraction of the effort that we're putting into the national debate on gun control into a national ad campaign about the 4 cardinal rules of gun safety, we could save a lot more lives than any of these gun control measures ever would. And I believe that's true. Right now in this country, about 1,000 people a year are killed in accidental shootings. That is a variety of things, from accidental discharges to hunting accidents. That's a pretty big one. But if you follow the 4 rules of the 4 cardinal rules of gun safety, none of those accidental shootings happen. So it's really that simple. You have to break at least 2 of these rules for an accidental shooting to happen. So what are the 4 cardinal rules of gun safety? Well, there's 3 basic concepts expressed in 4 rules, and those are: always treat a gun as if it is loaded, or always assume that a gun is loaded, or a gun is always loaded. Different ways to express that. The second is to keep your finger outside the trigger guard until you are ready to fire. This is something you'll notice with gun owners. We tend to pick things up like that. That's not because we like to do the pew-pew thing with our fingers. It's that we are trained with muscle memory that when you pick something up that's got a handle, that index finger points forward so as to not go into the trigger guard and accidentally pull the trigger. The third rule, the third concept, is to always keep it pointed in a safe direction, and that's usually expressed in 2 rules, which is never let the muzzle cover anything that you're not willing to destroy, and always be sure of your target and what's beyond. So, obviously, don't point it at something that you aren't willing to destroy, and then be aware of the surroundings beyond what you're shooting at, because the bullet might go through what you're shooting at, you might miss, and there might be something you don't want to hit beyond or around that. If you're using a gun in self-defense, that can be very important, because where you're shooting might not be a shooting range. It might be a mall, in which case you have to be aware of what's on the other side of the bad guy, or bad things can happen. That happens to police officers all the time. It's a big problem. So always be aware of what is around and beyond your target. So let's talk in a little more detail about how to translate that into proper handling procedures. So when it comes to always treat a gun as if it's loaded, there are a lot of situations where you have to do something that would not be appropriate to do with a loaded gun. So, for instance, taking it apart to clean it, checking the trigger if you're interested in buying it, things like that. That you have to make sure the gun is unloaded before you do it. So, another way to express that rule is, if the gun is supposed to be unloaded, check and make sure it's unloaded repeatedly. So one of the classic examples that you're going to see is you go to the gun store and you want to look at a gun. You tell the clerk, I want to see that one. He's going to pull it out from the counter. He's going to check and make sure that it's unloaded. He's going to hand it to you, and you need to do whatever he just did to check and make sure it's unloaded before you go do your, check the trigger, does it fit my hand? Can I, how the sights look? That kind of thing that you're going to do in the gun store that would be very inappropriate to do with a loaded gun. Well, you just checked, and he watched you check, and everybody around saw you check and make sure it was unloaded before you did that. Another thing, if you do get into guns, or if you do start concealed carry, it's recommended that you practice shooting with dry fire. So that is basically you line up your sights and you pull the trigger to get that muscle memory into how that trigger pull feels and how to keep the sights straight while you're doing it. It's not, it's not a real natural thing to have this grip real solid and then gently move that finger, with 12 pounds of force on the other side of it, without making your grip shake or anything like that. So that actually takes practice, and that's something that you got to practice. And when you practice, check that it's unloaded, and so on. Sort of an extension beyond keeping your finger outside the trigger guard, especially in regards to concealed carry, is keep anything outside the trigger guard if the gun is loaded and you're not doing something specific. So one of the most common causes of accidental discharges is reholstering, where you'll get, a piece of your shirt tucked in there and it'll catch and you try to push it into the holster and it'll fire. It's not a likely thing to happen with a gun like this that has a 12-pound trigger pull, but you have guns like a Glock or an M&P that have, a 6-pound trigger pull and no safety that you got to be careful with. So ways to get around that, ways to be safe. Well, the one solution is a gun like this 1911, which has a safety on it. And so when that safety is engaged, you can't pull the trigger. And so you make sure that safety is engaged. You hold that safety in the engaged position while you're holstering, and then you're safe. With the double action revolver, you've got a 12-pound trigger pull. You can get it down to like 8 sometimes, but you got a pretty heavy trigger pull that's a lot heavier than the weight of the gun. So it's something that you're going to notice as you're putting it in the holster. If something hangs up and there's enough force to pull the trigger, you're going to notice that difference in the amount of force that it takes to put it into your holster, and you're hopefully going to stop moving. Also, if you have an exposed hammer, you can keep your thumb on that hammer so that, again, you can resist that force even further. The other thing to make sure that you have is a holster with rigid enough sides, especially if you have a gun like this that has a very, very light trigger. It doesn't take much to pull that trigger. So even if it's in a soft-sided holster and you're moving around and squeezing and going about your day, you can accidentally pull that trigger in a soft-sided holster. So hard-sided holster, if you've got a light, crisp trigger pull, make sure you've got a safety. I tend to lean towards double action. The downside of double action is that it takes more practice on that dry fire trigger pull to be able to shoot it accurately. But if you put that practice in, it'll make you a better shooter. So, and it's also, since it's double action, you can just sit and practice. Whereas, with that Glock, if you want to do your double action, or you want to do your dry fire practice, it's rack the slide, then check, rack the slide, pull. Whereas with the double action, you can just go at it. The other thing I forgot to show you is how to show clear on these guns. So show clear is how to show that the gun is unloaded. So on a revolver, typically you're going to have a cylinder release latch over here. On Ruger and Kimber, it's a button that you push in. On Colt, it's a knob that you pull back. And on Smith & Wesson, Taurus, Rossi, and anybody else who makes revolvers, it's a push forward. You push forward on a knob. So this is a Ruger. So we push in here and we push out. Let me line that up so you can see it. Push out with these fingers to drop the cylinder to the side, and then you can look in the chambers and see that it is unloaded. With an automatic, typically it will have a magazine in it. What you need to do is drop the magazine out, and I'll show you how to do that. Most guns will have a release button in about this position. Some have a release latch on the heel here, and there's at least one out there that has a lever here in the bottom of the trigger guard that you push down. But anyways, the first thing you do, drop the magazine out, make sure that there's no bullets in the magazine, if there's not supposed to be bullets in the magazine, and then pull the slide back. And do that a couple times. Pull it this way so that you can see into the chamber, which I'm going to lock the slide back to show you where the chamber is. I'll shine a light from the other end so you can see where the light's coming through. That's where the chamber is. So if there was a bullet in there, you would see the back of a bullet and know that the gun is not unloaded. So, and that can happen because while, you know, if there's a little hook that pulls the bullet out when you rack the slide. So just going like this isn't necessarily enough, because if that extractor is broken, then that bullet might still be in there. And you just did this and it didn't do anything. There's still a bullet in there, and you pull the trigger and it's going to go bang. So make sure that you do that step of looking in the chamber and make sure that it's unloaded. I typically will lock the slide back and look. Every automatic that I know of has a slide stop. Most are automatically engaged when you fire the last round out of the magazine, but some are not. But they're all about here. Sometimes there's one on both sides, but basically how you lock the slide back is you push up on that lever while you pull it back, and then it will lock in this position. Now on most guns, if you push down on that, it will go into battery automatically. But you can also pull back on the slide to release it. So that's how you show clear on these guns. There's other guns out there. I don't have any rifles to show you, but most people are going to be talking about handguns anyways. So yeah, and there's not a whole lot to add to, you know, safe direction. You know, one thing to consider is when you're carrying concealed, that gun's going to end up pointed in an unsafe direction sometimes. I used to carry in a shoulder holster. That's particularly bad for that. And you know, how I slept at night was I had a gun with a safety on it, and I would hold my thumb on that safety while reholstering, or I would make sure that it was decocked, because this is a single action. So if the hammer's down, it can't fire. So I would have it with the hammer down, put it in, then cock it, then lock the safety, then close the strap. There was a retention strap that would block there. So I had multiple layers preventing this gun from firing. So it was not as big a deal that it wasn't pointed in the safe direction, because there were multiple fail-safes to prevent it from firing. In the case of my revolver, it's a little less of an issue. I pocket carry, so most of the time it's not pointed anywhere weird, but I still have it in a hard-sided holster that prevents the trigger from getting pulled. It's a double action with a 12-pound trigger pull, so the odds of it being pulled on accident are pretty slim. So yeah, I can't think of anything else that's crucial for you to know, and that you can translate into basic safe handling of a firearm. So if you think of anything else that I missed, leave a comment, and maybe I'll do a revision of this video in the future. So with that, if you are new to guns or don't like guns, you know, learn about it. Don't you know, if you don't like guns, don't hate what you don't understand. So learn about it. You know, don't just look at this video. You know, talk to your friends who own guns. talk about it, ask people about it, and maybe go to the range and try it. It might change your mind. And if you are, if you're making that decision to become a gun owner, absolutely get training. You don't necessarily have to go take classes. You can watch YouTube videos, practice. But don't just do whatever any idiot on the internet tells you to do. Be be careful and be reasonable. But you really, guns are serious business, and they are dangerous when misused. So it is imperative to get educated as much as you can, and to really, build in those safe handling practices so that it's second nature. When you pick something up, you want that finger to always point forward, because the one day that you grab that finger, that trigger wrong and accidentally pull the trigger, that might be a really bad day. So with that, see y'all later. I usually end my videos with a statement that's of personal significance to me, which is always remember to be ready every day to be somebody else's miracle. So with that, I'll see you later, and good luck.